Calling Act 3 dead implies a continuation of the story, but the first statement is a fact. The second is subjective because you can argue that it's so terrible that it worsens the game. There's a few ways to define postgame. If you say it's after the credits, then Act 3 is postgame. If you argue it's after the main game, then the game says it for me. And if postgame is after the main storyline, it's done after Act 2 since all the loose ends are tied up. In postgame you create a new timeline to solve problems in because the world after Act 2 has no more problems. Not having interacted with every element ever mentioned in lore isn't a loose end in the main storyline, and death isn't a problem to solve. On the matter of you solving death, the time travel is badly defined. For example, I'll test you right now. Does the Luminary remember the first timeline? I'm not giving you the answer. The overarching narrative with Kalasmos is as shallow. Something that annoys me to no end about Act 3 is that time travel means that all character development from Act 2 is undone. Among other things, the game wants to redo it because else there would be a bad taste left in the mouths of the players that want the perfect blossoming fanfiction timeline. But it would be so boring to reread all that story, so Act 3 takes a half-hearted approach. Not only does it undermine anything that happened in Act 2, cause apparently it didn't take much for those developments, but reading it physically hurts. The side stories are ashamed of themselves, they want to get themselves out of your way as quickly as possible. Act 3 lacks confidence and can't take itself serious, and neither can I, since else it would start spreading to the rest of the game. There's not many choices in this game, but the Michelle choice in Act 1 mattered. It's a moral dilemma with no clear answer. But no matter what you ended up doing, she's revived in Act 3. Even if that isn't even logical, cause if you told her the truth, she'd have died by the time you enter Arboria, and you don't go back that far. This was done because they felt the need to add a side quest that she's involved in, and nothing in this game is missable. Besides that, the most memorable moment in this game is Veronica's death. It's not uncommon to hear people say how they cried over her. Losing a party member permanently is incredibly impactful. Not only because it's a sad story beat, but you're now down a party member. You're never gonna use her in combat again and you're worse off for it. The rest of the game plays out with one free slot in your party at all times. All the menus are made to fit 8 people and that empty space is a constant reminder of what you've lost. Or you scratched it permanently, I guess. I have never heard anyone reminisce over how deeply they were affected by the temporary loss of a party member. This is all unoffensive as bonus content though. That's why she comes back in post-game. All of this is to nicely wrap things up, give players that want 100% a perfect happy ending. Act 3 is mostly for gameplay purposes anyways, right? At least that's what I often hear, but the gameplay is boring and redundant. Encounters in this game have 4 main ways of being fresh and exciting. Number 1 is non-gameplay reasons, so for example aesthetics, good designs, which is plentiful in Dragon Quest, but oops, Act 3 only has reskins. There's also no story significance to refights. The next 3 are all about fights, allowing you to think. 2 is when you can prepare beforehand to make the fight easier. This no longer applies because the bosses are all very non-specific. They use multiple elements and multiple attack times, so gone are the times where you can get specific equipment to resist all that a boss does. Even weaknesses to exploit have been toned down. Thirdly, we have aha moments. It's good when the game makes you feel smart by rewarding you for thinking, like with intended ways to make encounters easier. For example, by using bounce against a boss that only uses spells for damage. I am not talking about using the Sword of Light or the cannon here. For this, a fight doesn't need to be hard to begin with, but it helps if there's a semblance of challenge to circumvent. Lastly is limited resources which force decisions. The same goes for other types of limitations you need to play around, so having fewer party members or needing to kill a boss a certain way. Needless to say, Act 3 doesn't limit you much since it's post-game. There are some exceptions though, and I'll give 4 encounters here besides Kalasmos minimal credit for checking at least one box. Yermund and the Gold Giants are gimmicks, and getting them down to the right amount of HP might be unfun, but it's not uninteresting. The encounter under Octagonia is 2 back-to-back bosses where one is a whole bunch of enemies, so AoE has a time to shine, even if Octagon is the exact same fight as in Act 1. And fighting Mordegon with your low level party is legit fun. These 4 are also mind-numbingly easy, but they're different from the rest, which don't check a single box since they are too busy preventing you from cheesing, which makes them all play out the exact same. But how can I call these bosses easy? They're stronger than Act 2 bosses. The difference is what you have available. Everything. There's a million generic ways to trivialize any fight, and once you found your exploit of choice, it works against everything. Which is because since every boss does everything and isn't weak against anything, nobody is unique anymore. It doesn't help that Mighty Magic Burst is available at any level even before Magic Burst and almost kills a few bosses by itself. And why would you fight the bosses anyways? They don't give worthwhile rewards. Making already easy gameplay, no matter how many draconian quests you have, are noticeably easier, or so often changing nothing isn't worth the 20 minutes or so it takes. The bosses aren't only boring, they're worthless. If you just want to clear post-game, it takes maybe an hour, unless you grind to max level. Some people enjoy grinding for the sake of seeing their levels go up, and even they only get maybe 2 hours of joy with an optimized setup, because electrolyte gets upgraded once you're at post-game and it makes you level super quick. And even if you try your best not to exploit the enemy, your party's power rises faster than enemies get stronger. Comparatively, the stats aren't even that much higher. Kalasmos, for example, has the same HP as only the parts in the Mordegon phase in the final fight in Act 2. And yes, he only takes half damage until you dispel the aura. But you get the super sword of light from a story event, always have it, and it doesn't even take an action. It also doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you need to use the sword of light to dispel the aura, since it reminds you that it's up every turn, and the only reason you ever got the sword of light to begin with was to dispel a barrier. Nothing you get or cause in any of these scenarios, including the in-universe training, makes the fight easier, and it's about as hard as the final boss in Act 2 either way. And on that note, Kalasmos has way less interesting moves. You either prevent them by spamming AoEs, or with the time freeze he kills one party member. It's a worse desperate attack that might get stuffed by flashback or back etcher if you have it. And Time Worm is a reskin of a much more interesting fight. The most unique thing he has is a mist that weakens the 2 magic bursts, but that's only a band-aid fix because magic burst is so overpowered. He does give you the most interesting reward. It's basically Godmode, but it can help you if you're struggling with the Wheel of Armor without giving you a free win. That part is nice. And on that note, so's the Wheel of Armor. But getting to Time Worm isn't. Tickington is a whole nother topic. I strongly dislike Tickington, so I try to avoid it. As you can probably tell, the same goes for postgame.